Hi, I wonder if you could help me out. I am looking to hire a global head of growth for Automated Creative. So, a little bit about us. We're on a mission to help brands turn their impressions into intelligence. We have a technology that researches consumers by analyzing how they respond to optimize paid advertising. It's very fancy, very cool, and very successful for brands like Adidas, Samsung, Diageo, Reckitt, KFC, Pernod Ricard, Bose, Unilever, GSK, and people like NCS. So we've been doing brilliant work for the past few years, and we want to hire someone that can help us grow our portfolio of exciting and innovative clients. So if you or someone you know have been working in sales or new business for the last 10 or 15 years and would like to talk to us about the position, please could you give me an email on tom@automatedcreative.net. Right, on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is absolutely no different. I'm on a call with Shruti Samant, who is a digital marketing specialist at P&G Health. Shruti, for those who are listening to this show, could you just give them a bit of an overview about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Tom. How are you? Thanks so much for inviting me to your awesome podcast. It's such a privilege to be on your show. And what we'll be discussing will be my views only. So a bit about me. Since my childhood, I've been very much inclined towards arts in its various forms. This passion led me to enroll for an interior designing and architecture course, and then to pursuing engineering and chemical technology and MBA. As a person, I like diversity, and hence I worked in different industries like IT with Infosys, confectionery and snacks with Petit Mill, then financial sector with India's largest bank, and currently I lead digital marketing for brands at Procter and Gamble Health. I also like to compose music along with singing and songwriting. So we know that May emphasizes on mental health awareness. Recently, I have made a song called Shatter to highlight how vulnerable you become, and also from the perspective of how we can support by just taking simple steps like, firstly, don't cause any scenario that might create or aggravate mental distraught. And secondly, support. So even if it is as simple as just being there, as we often have the tendency to leave a person alone when they're feeling down, or we try to avoid talking about it with the person. We pretend that it's only a counselor's responsibility to support or talk about it. But you see, about more than 75% of people who have a mental distraught, especially in developing or still emerging countries, they suffer in silence because they can't or don't seek counseling. So the least we can do is to firstly not cause, and we should simply ensure to be there. Just be a friend. It's as simple as that.
And would you be willing to sing on the podcast?
Oh, yeah, sure. Definitely, why not? So, I'll be singing the same lines that I just explained, which emphasize the importance of support. So don't you turn up anymore, accept me as who I am. Trying too hard to blend. It's not that easy, I know, deeper than a plateau. Just try to be a friend. Why don't we shatter these reins and break it loose? Run like the wind and feel me too. One step closer with someone feeling down. Stay around. Give your hand and feel me too. They may seem alright, they might not be true. You wouldn't know cause they won't tell you. So yeah, that's about it.
Shruti, thank you so much. I think we're at episode 130 or 140 of this podcast, and no one has even thought about singing. So you're in a league of one. So congratulations for that. And being our first singer on the podcast, that was fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So unfortunately, we have to go back to the somewhat less rock and roll world of marketing. So what I'm curious to know is, so you're a creator, you write, you sing. Are you also a reader? And if so, do you have any marketing books that you recommend?
Yes, so I'm not really a very avid reader, but I like consuming content, be it through browsing or observing on social media or through reading books. So when it comes to marketing, especially, when you want to recommend to a student, I think marketing is more of an observational and experiential learning. So, especially with social media marketing, you definitely need to refer to online platform specific tutorials designed specifically for platforms like Google, YouTube, or Facebook, or to learn analytics, etc. But for a campaign design strategy or brand marketing, so there's no one book rule really. It's basically understanding the consumers, their needs, and how you can offer the best relevant product or services, and how best are you able to convey that, especially now that social media and internet is one of the primary platforms to gain knowledge. And there are so many products or celebrities who have very efficiently turned themselves into successful brands just because of social media. So besides reading a book, like for example, Kotler's, which is very essential and will definitely lay out the fundamentals,
Shruti,
I
so
will also,
Sorry, which is that book specifically for people who don't know it?
yes, Philip Kotler. So it's a book which is primarily, at least like I'm aware in India, it is the go-to book for marketing, for knowing the marketing fundamentals. It's by Philip Kotler. So it's a great book if you want to get your fundamentals corrected or fundamentals in place.
Can you help the listeners understand what those fundamentals are? So some people won't have heard of the book already. So I'm just curious to know what are the kind of key takeaways from that book?
Yes, so one of the examples would be the 5 A's framework, which is aware, appeal, ask, act, and advocate. So, aware is the phase where consumers are passively exposed to brands, advertising, influencers, friends, family. Then, appeal, which is whether or not consumers have registered that particular ad or brand messaging. Then, ask, where consumer collects information about this particular brand. Then, act, which is either purchase, usage, or post purchase service. And advocate, which is basically retention and word of mouth.
But more from creating, more from a social media angle, because, right, I feel that marketing again is more of a hands-on or experiential learning, especially digital marketing. So you can definitely follow, a lot of, since you already must be following a lot of brands or celebrities, right, on your social media when you consume content. So you can also start analyzing, the kind of content they're posting, the frequency, or, the certain digital metrics, which you would be learning from either the online tutorials or a lot of other fundamental books. So you can follow the brands that you already follow. Would you like to give me such an example of somebody maybe I followed or that I think has kind of, turned himself or herself into a great brand using social media?
Are you asking me for an example, or
do you want to share an example?
No.
Sorry.
Would you like me to elaborate more, or
well,
is it clear?
hopefully we can come back to that a little bit later, perhaps. But what I'd really like to do is move on to a question about how you spend your time or your money. What has been the best investment of your time, energy, or money in the last few years?
Yes, sure. So in terms of energy or time, I would say that the best investment has been to follow my passion. And I do follow my passion. And since childhood, I've been passionate about arts. So I started composing music, and then I got into production, then into filmmaking, on my own, like a hobby. And as you know, there was no YouTube or many digital tools back then. But because I was so passionate about it, I kind of learned on my own. And although my MBA did teach me the fundamentals or concepts of marketing more in terms of metrics or strategy or framework, but the main understanding of creating a content, be it an audio ad or a video ad or any social media content, like designing a marketing content, I got that acumen because I pursued my passion. And I think marketing is a blend of expression from arts that I got from my passion, and logic or data analytics that I got from science of my engineering background, and definitely concepts and strategy and fundamentals from MBA. So in the process of pursuing my passion as a hobby, I learned the art of creating content. And I think content is the most important element in marketing.
And it's just such an interesting answer that I really like the way that you said, I learned this from so-and-so, learned this from such and such, and yet they've all come together as marketing. And I think sometimes people feel that like marketing is sort of less of an art than the things that you mentioned. But when you talk about how you combine all those things, I think that's fascinating. So you've had so many different hats you've worn, where talking about film, music, whether you've worked in finance or architecture or interior design, definitely the most broad background of anyone who's been on this podcast. But I'm curious to know, do you have a marketing tip that you always give your team, or that you always find yourself passing on to those who are looking to you for guidance?
Yes. So this is something that I even, follow myself. It's quite simple, but I usually say, follow the latest, be different, and stay relevant. So to explain it a little bit more, so since marketing is very agile, especially digital marketing, so it's extremely important to keep up with the latest technology for its application, for platforms, or even, to know the trends for content, because there's so much digital clutter. And advertising is anyhow a crowded arena. So competition to get that attention of consumers is quite fierce, as every other business of different sector is competing to have their voice heard. So the best method of standing out in marketing is to know exactly what objectives are, who your audience is, and what are the most effective ways of getting their attention. This may sound like a very redundant or basic advice, but mostly what's happening on digital platforms, including search or social media, is that as a consumer, you are irritated. And I know this because I'm a consumer, right? Because a consumer is bombarded with just too many ads, even if the consumer is not interested. I understand that there are methods to make it more segmented or need-based, but more or less there's a huge overlap in the sets of audiences itself. And even if you segment it down to interests, because a consumer doesn't have just a few interests, right? A consumer has a plethora of things that he or she is interested in, but that doesn't mean that they want to see your brand or your competitor's brand, or maybe not. And this is just the case of a single category further drilled down, especially when you talk about search, when there is a whole lot of, so I do see a lot of, improper tagging as a consumer, when I'm searching for stuff, or not using the appropriate sets of keywords. So why do usually, why is it being done? I assume that it's primarily because of FOMO of visibility. So FOMO, which is fear of missing out, it not just applies to customers, it also applies to advertising. So fear of missing out on marketing platforms, especially on digital. If you are not there, you think you are missing out on where your audience is, even if that is the set of platform where audience is not interested in your ad. And that's precisely one of the many reasons why consumers get annoyed when they're watching a content and then your ad pops up. So it does create awareness, but whether or not a consumer will convert or even recall depends primarily on the content and the need and relevance. You may say that on ATL also it's kind of the same, but you see the format in ATL is a little different. There are longer sections where ads are shown all together, but on social media, the available frequency of showing the ad is too high. So certain platforms are just too short to even, register the ad in the minds of consumers. Although it does depend a lot on content, but I'm talking in general. And especially as a consumer, when you're scrolling through the content, unless the ad is relevant to you or the content is distinct, you really, don't care much as a consumer. So just because the platform provides an access to define your targeting, it doesn't necessarily imply that as a marketer kind of overuse its availability. And usually there is a very common audience targeting, even between different industries. So it's extremely important to stay relevant because there is so much digital clutter. And to even have a recall or response from audience about your advertising or marketing, the content definitely has to be different. To summarize, my best marketing tip which I myself follow, is to follow the latest, be different, and stay relevant.
Fantastic. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. We are now going to talk about your shiny new object, which has an amazing title. So I'm going to read it out. It's socially, musically yours, brackets, respect thy consumers, close brackets, with voice tech. So what does that mean?
Oh, yes. So as fancy as it sounds, it's quite, easy to understand, which I'll explain. So like I was saying, there is so much digital content, right, with consumers being shown so many ads on different digital platforms. So it's kind of become a rat race to advertise and monetize on digital medium. I think the most important question is whether or not digital marketing is even relevant to a particular service, product, or brand. And like I said, a lot of advertisers, just out of FOMO or to maintain their social media presence, are there on digital. So this kind of makes the digital platform even more so cluttered, and especially if the content is irrelevant to the consumer and not customized. So it's crucial to cut through the digital clutter because it's visually so crowded. And I feel the best way to do is to utilize the concept of sonic branding.
Like in music streaming platforms where a native ad is often accompanied with an audio jingle or, a mix of both audio and digital.
So that is how, it's musically yours. So it's kind of blending the best of the old audio branding with the best of the new digital. So sonic branding is basically audio branding that involves assigning a specific tune, sound, or jingle to a brand or logo that reinforces its identity. They can be audio ads, catchy tunes, simple mnemonics, sonic logos, or non-lyrical jingles that focus on conveying strong messages to the audience through music or sounds. So, for example, it can be the background music that you see in your advertisements or a phrase you say at the end of your video or blog, or even, Tom, your podcast. So, yeah, I noticed. So like in your podcast, the music that you play in between at the start or in between the commercials, that could be the sonic logo of your podcast, which I don't know if it is.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with that. Not that anyone's ever mentioned it before, but I used I can't remember which service I used, but I used like a creative AI tool to make the sonic logo. I'm going to refer to it from now on.
Yes, because we, once we start listening to your podcast, you kind of, it gets registered, and it's really cool and great to listen to. Very peppy, uplifts the mood. So this is where the psychology side of it comes in. So I was just reading that, sound affects the limbic part of the brain. I know it's a little sound scientific, but that deals with emotions and memory. So that's the reason why when we hear a jingle, we recall it much faster than a visual ad. It can be more influential than a video ad because an audio ad is distinctive. The space is not cluttered, unlike, how I was talking about digital visually, and it has its own dedicated spot. So as a consumer, you just hear it, an audio spot, right? And it gets registered much better. It may even influence the purchasing behavior. For example, if you're in a store and you're buying, let's say, a juice, and you suddenly hear the jingle or the tune that is a beat, which you must have heard earlier, you immediately feel like buying it. It changes your mood. You kind of reconnect it with, it reminds of you of being energetic, working out, staying fit, and it may initiate an action into you purchasing it. So it also induces that familiarity by triggering recall, and it immediately tells the potential customer what kind of brand you are. Are you serious? Are you quirky? Are you fun? Are you classy? And it does trigger a response through action.
So do you have any
data on how many impressions a sonic branding needs to deliver before it elicits the right kind of emotion? So, for example, my daughter and I were watching the Pixar film WALL-E the other day, and the character Eva was designed by the guy that designed the iPhone, Johnny Ive. I'm never sure his name. Anyway, there's a scene where WALL-E has his solar panels out, and he charges, and at the point at which he reaches 100% charge, it plays the same sound as when you're turning a Mac on. And it was a really lovely kind of sonic branding moment in the film. But had I heard that sound for the first time, would that have had the same effect on me? Probably not, because I didn't obviously have an association with Apple. So yes, music is very powerful. Yes, it can evoke memories. Yes, it can work faster than visuals. I agree with that. But then that sound needs to become first likable, second familiar, but third, it needs to be associated. So do you have any data or insight on how often a consumer needs to be exposed to a sonic signature or sonic logo before it actually starts to do the job? Or does it work straight away?
So there are a couple of options, and I do agree with what you're saying. So in order for you to become familiar at the maybe third frequency of you hearing it, it also has to, firstly, you need to define your sound, sonic logo or sonic branding, matching the personality of your brand, right? Like I mentioned, it should be positioned accordingly, in accordance with your brand. And when it comes to frequency or how often would you like the consumer to be exposed to it? So if it is a sonic logo, I think it needs to kind of be consistent across your brand. So that so there are a lot of, Indian ads or even global ads where you kind of, when you hear, for example, McDonald's, when you hear,
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it.
Right? So you may not recall visually what ad, you must have seen of McDonald's, but when you hear that, sound or jingle, which I'm assuming it was at some point of theirs, then you kind of immediately connect with it, right? That, okay, this is McDonald's. And even if not that, so for example, in India also, there are a lot of, brands that use it, even in financial sector. There are banks that use the sonic logo at their outlets, like their, the branches, the bank branches, the ATM machines, or the, their caller tunes, or through their call center, like on a customer care. So all these are different touch points of where you can expose a customer to connect through that sonic, to have a familiarity with your brand through that. Other than, of course, when it comes to FMCG or, such, where it's more retail oriented. So there you definitely, obviously, stores do play a lot and advertisements do play a lot. So you can even have it as, like a background of your ad or something.
So, just quick question.
Do you think that it's an opportunity or a necessity? So you give the example of, a phone line. So I say, for example, my internet stops working, which happens. They will not be mentioned. And I call them up. And what I don't want there is sonic branding. I want customer service. So I don't care if the audio on the phone, on the hold music, is the same as the audio on the advert. In fact, like that, I'm so enraged by the fact that I can't get online and do my job and run a business. What I want is customer service, and actually with McDonald's, what I want is to get my food quicker, or I want more options, or I want it to be cheaper, or I want it to be delivered. The audio branding piece feels at that point as a nice to have, as opposed to a necessity. So is there a point at which in a brand's journey or evolution that it needs to start to thinking about this does the corner shop at the end of the road need to think about its sonic identity? Probably not. But does a scale up that's got 2,000 employees or something that's starting to become like a more global player? So at which point does sonic identity and sonic branding become a necessity to a contemporary brand?
Yes, absolutely. So I suppose what you're talking about is, I completely agree with you. But as a consumer, you definitely do call up a center and, you do get annoyed but that is only because you're put on hold for a much longer period. Right? You definitely want, so that's a completely different scenario. But in the meanwhile, to connect better, because they might anyways, if there is a queue of customers, who are calling a customer service, if it's a case where they do need to put you on hold, right? You might have to listen to that. So it's an opportunity there. But I do agree that turnaround time or the delivery time definitely needs to be much faster. But I was explaining more in terms of this being an opportunity, and not just talking in terms of sonic logos, right? It is more to do with blending both the audio branding and the visual together. So especially because there is such a boom in voice technology, which is kind of become the most disruptive force globally ever since the internet became a visual medium. And to point out a few, data points. So I was just reading about that about 30 to 50% of all searches are voice-led, and whether it's through, different voice assistants like Cortana, Alexa, Google Home, Siri, and many others, with even, Facebook trying to kind of, launching its own voice assistant soon. So currently there are more than 1 billion voice searches per month. And according to Adobe, there are about 47% people who use voice tech to gather product-specific information, and 32% comparing price, and 42% adding items to their shopping cart. So you see how effective this would be as an opportunity and convenience to both consumers and marketeers. And currently, the voice shopping has about $2 billion valuation, and is estimated to increase by a tremendous, $40 billion in very near future. And few of the brands, they have already initiated, they have already stepped into this. So since we were talking about fast food, right? So Domino's, they are a QSR, quick service restaurant, and initiated by launching Dom, their own personalized voice assistant, and then partnered with Amazon. Similarly, Nestle, they launched Goodness with Alexa giving recipes and nutritional information for a specific meal, cookbook, and you can even ask which utensils you would need for the recipe. So it definitely elevates the whole cooking experience.
That was a really unusual moment, because that was my agency that did that. So I'm very proud to say.
Launched Dom in the UK, as simple as it was back in the day. So that is...
I'll put my hand up and say I was involved in that. Certainly, I didn't build it myself.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. I absolutely didn't know. Oh, I didn't know that. That's great to hear, Tom. That's amazing.
Anyway, sorry, that was I was not expecting you to say that. But anyway, carry on. Sorry.
So there is a huge scope for voice technology, and primarily because it's very convenient, right? And the role that technology plays is to make it as convenient as you can for yourself or consumers, So to summarize, yes, my shiny new object
is socially musically yours. Respect thy consumers. By socially, I mean being socially more responsible towards consumers in advertising on social media, and musically yours by utilizing the concept of audio branding clubbed with digital marketing on either music streaming platforms or voice technology that has a huge scope to create that uncluttered advertising method. And respect thy consumers by being more sensitive in advertising to consumers.
So you obviously have so much to say on this very interesting subject. So if any of our listeners wanted to carry on that conversation with you, how would you like them to do that?
Yes, definitely. That'd be great. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can search me by Shruti Samant. And global listeners, I think you can check out my spelling on Tom's podcast. So it'll be easier to search. So please, that'd be great. Message me.
Brilliant. Shruti, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure, Tom. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. And I for sure had a lot of fun talking to you.
Me as well. And for the singing. That was a massive first for us. Thank you so much. Hi. Just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.